गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रधायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतुषे नमः वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Welcome everyone to today's Sunday feast class. How many of the Vaishnavas here are coming for the first time or have been coming only recently? Okay, welcome. So just as context, by the way, if everyone would like to come a little closer, because I think as we come closer to 7 o'clock, more and more Vaishnavas will enter the hall. Just feel free to come in a little bit. Thank you. So just as context, many of you may have heard about ISKCON before coming here. ISKCON is famous, yes, for its temples, for its aratis, for its kirtan. But the principal purpose of these ISKCON centers being set up is to provide education, is to provide the teachings of the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita to people in general. Practically all of us have come acquainted with the Vedic culture in some form or the other. All of us have visited some temples in the past. All of us have either performed arati or have seen arati being performed. But very often the purpose of those particular rituals is not known. What is the goal of these practitioners? What are they aiming for? What are they trying to do? All of this is practically unknown. So even though there are many classes that run throughout the week, this Sunday program was established by the founder of ISKCON, Sripad Prabhupada, as a way for everyone to come together. It's, if you'd like, the most generic and the most welcoming of all the programs that ISKCON has. And its purpose is to create a festival. So there's a festival of kirtan, there's a festival of discussion on the scriptures, and there's a festival of prasadam. And that's the purpose of this Sunday feast. Originally it was called the Love Feast in 1967 or 66 when it was originally initiated. But it's called the Sunday Feast program. So 6 to 7 every Sunday, you will see a specific topic being chosen. There is no necessary sequence to the topics, week on week. Nonetheless, the topics are presented by those Vaishnavas who have received some training in the past. And they present topics on the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam so that people become interested. They come to know, why are we coming here? What is the purpose behind our following what we are following? And they may become attracted to trying to find out more. So following this feast, you'll often see a book table outside where you will see copies of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. being presented. And it is our hope that the Vaishnavas who are interested may pick up a book for further study, for further reading, for further inquiry. But thank you again so much for coming. The topic this particular Sunday, it's a special topic. It's actually a part of a series of topics called our exalted predecessors. Every endeavor, every field, whether it's sporting or whether it's academics or whether it's a particular royal rule, there's always a rich cultural history that people who are an integral part of that sport or that culture become aware of. Because it's that culture carried forward as a torchlight by personalities throughout history who practice they manifest that culture in their character and their words that explain and teach us what that culture stands for. Similarly, in the Vaishnava culture, there are many, many exalted personalities who stand as great stalwarts on the path of devotional service. Through their life, Through their teachings, we come to know an enormous amount about what we are doing, about what our heritage is. And we become convinced of the fact that we are not just, recent practitioners with a New Age tradition or discovering something for an immediate purpose. But this tradition is the oldest of all traditions. It answers age-old questions that even though people of different times had practically, seemingly different lives, but they had the same core age-old questions. And we see the solutions to those questions that have been established by the great personalities of the past. So about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we had spoken on one such topic, which was the life and teachings from the Pastimes of Sripad Madhvacarya. So that was one of the installments of this, our exalted predecessor series. This is another installment. And this is about the life and the teachings from the Pastimes of Sripad Madhvacarya. As with Ramanujacharya, the Pastimes of Madhvacarya are extremely extensive. And their purpose and their depth, it is difficult to discuss within the course of 40 odd minutes. But we will try to illustrate the central focus of his teachings and key elements of his pastimes that serve as a wonderful example, a wonderful source of inspiration for us all. How many of the Vaishnavas here have heard of or read about Madhvacharya in the past? Can you raise your hand? So not many. Okay. How many here have been to Udupi before? Okay, a few more Vaishnavas. How many here have heard of Madhvacharya from Srila Prabhupada's books or from the classes of the Vaishnavas? Okay. So Madhvacharya appeared about roughly little less than 800 years ago. Now in context, Sripad Ramanuja had come a little bit more than 1,000 years ago. So a little bit more than 200 years before Madhvacharya. And as we spoke about 4 or 5 weeks ago, Ramanuja came to establish devotional service to the Lord as a fundamental tenet. Because before him, Shankaracharya, whose service it had been to establish the credibility of the Vedic scriptures, he had come and established the Vedic scriptures, but his message was not exactly what the Vedic scriptures spoke of. We elaborated on this point 4 or 5 weeks ago. After Ramanuja came and pointed out that there is a difference between us, a minuscule living entity, the Shastras say 1/10,000th of the tip of a hair, in comparison to the exalted Supreme Lord, who pervades the heart of every living entity, who is within every single atom, that this difference is fundamental and eternally exists. When Ramanuja pointed this out, through his teachings and through the centers that he established the foundation for devotional service. Yet, Shankaracharya's teachings were so widely prevalent and so much attractive to people who were already moving away from the Supreme Lord. Because that's the nature of this particular age. This age is known as Kali Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, people's natural inclination is to assert their independence in small ways or in big ways away from the Supreme Lord. So anything that helps the jiva feel like that he doesn't need the Lord, that everything he needs comes from himself, and that all he has to do is certain small and simple things in order to be established in his own glory, the living entity naturally catches and holds on. This philosophy, you will probably recognize, is quite prevalent even today in various forms. Whatever the name of the teacher, whatever the name of the institute, you will see this philosophy at its core being spread everywhere. So after Ramanuja came and defeated this philosophy in his writings, his teachings, and through the establishment of the culture, the very strong Vaishnava culture that he had established, nonetheless, gradually, Shankaracharya's teachings began to take hold of people in general. So much so that the Vaishnava sannyasis were afraid to stand up against the Mayavad sannyasis. Many of the Vaishnava sannyasis disguised themselves with the dress, the mannerisms of the Mayavad sannyasis, so that they could hide their practices of devotional service, or at least would not be criticized for them. They were unequipped with arguments to stand up against the logic and against the presentation of the Mayavad sannyasis. It was in this environment where the meaning of the Vedas, the core of the Vedas, which establishes devotional service to the Lord, where this center was being hidden, that all the Devatas approached Lord Vishnu. They approached Lord Vishnu, who was lying on the ocean of milk, and they said, "Oh my Lord, are you not aware of the situation that's happening down there? Do you not see that people in general have turned away from you? As a result, all devotional service, all means of humble offering towards you has stopped. People are thinking that they themselves are basically the supreme. And in this manner, we ourselves are in an anguished fashion." Now one can ask, why the Devatas so afflicted? It's because they become natural, they are part and parcel of the Lord. Just like when a body is undernourished, similarly the hands and feet also experience suffering. When worship of the Supreme Lord is stopped, the Devas who are like Angas of the universal form of the Lord, they also become disturbed. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Sahayagya praja shishtva puro vacha prajapati anena prashayishyadvam eshivostvishta kamaduk. In the beginning of creation, Vishnu, who is the master of all yagya, sent forth all living entities and said, "Please take this yagya and use it to worship me. By worshipping me in this way, you will be satisfied, and the devas who will be nourished by your performance of yagya will be pleased to give you all varieties of natural benedictions, like proper rain at the right time, not 4 months in a year, morning, evening, night, causing flooding all over the place. They will be pleased to give you natural resources like jewels, vegetables, fruits, to feel nourished. And in this way, by mutual cooperation, you can both be happy in this world and establish a platform to progress onto the next world." So the Devas approached the Lord, and they explained that they were feeling disturbed. The Lord, he heard them, and he did not say anything. He just turned his neck where the chief of the demigods, called Mukhya Pran or Vayu. Vayudev is called Mukhya Pran because it is because of him all of us have prana moving within our body. There's nothing within this universe that can function without this essential prana element. We say when somebody passes away, pran chala gaya. In Hindi you say that. It means my pran has left the body. This doesn't mean the soul has left the body, but the atma sits within a cloud of the pranas. And when the pran leaves, it takes the soul with it. Or when the soul leaves, it goes surrounded by these pranas to the next body. All life is sustained, all movement of the sun, of the various planets, of all vegetation is sustained by the function of Mukhya Prana. In this way, Mukhya Prana is considered to be the chief of the Devatas. And he's actually an exalted representative and a Vaishnava of the Lord. So the Lord, he was just glancing. And as he glanced, he happened to look at Mukhya Prana. And with his glance, he didn't say anything. But it was like, I need you to do something. And it was just a simple glance and a simple nod of acknowledgement. The Lord glanced at him, and Mukhya Prana said, okay. The next scene in the Pastimes of Madhvacarya, it cuts to a simple village. This is in Karnataka. Now in this village is associated with the worship of Parshurama. Is my voice heard or is it soft? Is that better? Okay. This village is associated with the worship of Parshurama. Previously, when Parshurama had destroyed 21 generations of Kshatriyas, with the blood of the Kshatriyas, he had created 4 lakes around that area. And those lakes over time, of course, had been replaced with water, but still, even now, are considered to be exalted places of pilgrimage. So there, the temple of Parashurama is the principal focus of worship. Madhya Bhatta was a simple brahmana who was staying nearby that place of worship. And he was to be the father of Madhvacharya. In fact, his wife was already pregnant. And as he was walking to the temple, as was his habit on a daily basis, one day he worshipped the Lord and he was coming out. Suddenly, one man, as if possessed, he climbed onto the very top of the temple. And normally when you see someone do this, you think, what drugs has he taken? But this man climbed to the very top of the temple, and in a very loud voice, he began to proclaim, "One will come very soon amongst the faithful congregation here. That one, the son of one of the congregation, will soon establish the glories of the Lord." Saying this, he climbed down as if nothing had happened. It is said that in this age, and this happens in the pastimes of Ramanuja also, that when the Lord wanted to convey a message to the congregation, he would often enter into the body, or from within the heart of the body, he would take over the functions of this individual or this devotee and proclaim his message. So Madhya Bhatta, he heard this, and he didn't think much of it. He just went home to his wife, whose name was Vedavati. When he went home, Vedavati expressed to him that she felt something special was going to happen. And Madhya Bhatta told her about the prophecy in the temple. They both discussed it for some time, but they didn't know what to make more. They didn't know what to make of it. And they retired. Madhvacharya, or I should say Mukhya Prana, he decided, seeing among all the congregation at this temple, he decided that he wanted to enter Vedavati's womb. The child in Vedavati's womb was actually not yet Mukhya Prana, it was somebody else. But Mukhya Prana decided that I want to enter Vedavati's womb. So he entered in subtly, and seeing that somebody else was already there, he gave that child a kick. And basically he kicked him to Vaikuntha. And he entered into Vedavati's womb. No, it's kind of a nice way to go to Vaikuntha. Within due course of time, Madhvacharya was born. His features are considered to be extremely strong. Now, whenever you read, the main text to describe the pastimes of Madhvacharya is a book called Madhva which was written by an exalted personality called Narayana Panditacharya. He was born as the son of an associate of Madhvacharya. And in this book, Madhva Vijaya, Sripad Madhvacharya's glories are always connected to the glories of Bhima and Hanuman in the past. Bhima and Hanuman are both considered to be offspring or expansions of the same Mukhya Prana. And the same features that were present in Hanuman and Bhima were also present in this young boy. This boy was named Vasudeva, and his antics and his playfulness resembled that of Hanuman and Bhima. So if you have heard of the pastimes of Hanuman or Bhima, they were both exceedingly strong physically, and they loved to just play, to make fun, and just have a good time. So when Madhvacharya was initially put under tutoring by a teacher, the teacher was trying to teach him and get him to memorize certain verses. Vasudeva was not interested. He just wanted to play. The teacher said, "But you have to learn. This is not proper behavior." Vasudeva said, "Such memorization of verses is not of interest to me." The teacher said, "Well, if you think you're so clever, you tell me this verse." One after another, Vasudeva began to recite these verses without any previous education, without any previous training. He was asked, "How do you know all this?" He said, "This is knowledge that I've accumulated in previous lifetimes." But Vasudeva, he used to go out with his friends and he would play. On once a journey, there was a snake. This snake was considered to be an incarnation of a Rakshasa called Maniman. Now Maniman, if you read the Mahabharata, was a demon killed by Bhima. Now, Maniman had come again as a snake, hearing that Bhima had reincarnated. Hearing that Bhima had reincarnated, Maniman came there, and it was his desire to take revenge against Vasudev. He came and he was about to bite him. Madhvacharya caught his mouth by the toe and just flicked him upwards. In this way, he broke Maniman's neck and sent him back. Where he went, I'm not sure. But he was touched by the feet of an exalted Vaishnava, so one can only guess what his destination would be. Another time, he was just walking, and he was out very, very late. His mother was very tensed up. Where's my son? It's evening time. The sun's about to go down. When is my son coming home? And she began to call out, Vasudev, Vasudev, where are you, Vasudev? And so Vasudev, he was a long way away. And he heard his mother calling, and he was several kilometers away. So he told his friends, my mother is calling, I have to go. He jumped. And with landing on a single toe right on the doorstep of his house, he said, Mother, I'm here. And he walked into the house. The footprint or the toe print of Madhvacharya is still present, they say. And you can see that imprint on the ground for his having jumped all that distance. There's another instance from his youth. As a young child, he was always very, very hungry. Actually, later on, Madhvacharya he was going with his disciples on a particular yatra, and there was some individual who wanted to offer him a lot of, to serve him, offer a lot of prasad. So Madhvacharya just began to eat it, and eat it, and eat it. He just kept eating. He ate enough for 30 men, 30 strong and big men. After eating all of that, another farmer came and gave him as a gift 200 bananas. And Madhvacharya, in a matter of minutes, consumed those 200 bananas. And, his spiritual master, I'll speak about him shortly, Achyuta Preksha, was completely astonished. He was like, how on earth did you eat all this? Madhvacharya said that my digestive fire is the size of the thumb and burns like the fire of cosmic destruction. It can eat as much as it likes and is never satisfied. I guess this resembles Bhima, at least. I've not heard this with respect to Hanuman as much, but certainly it resembles Bhima's hunger or appetite. So once when Madhva was a baby, he was very, very hungry, and he was crying. And his sister, he had an elder sister, she was looking for their mother. Their mother was engaged in some work. And as she was looking for their mother, she just put the baby down and ran off. She put the baby down in a shed which has horse gram, uncooked horse gram, meant to feed horses. And there were sachets and sachets and sachets, like the whole barn was filled with that horse gram. So she told her mother, and the mother and daughter, they came running back. By the time they'd come running back, they saw the barn was empty, and they saw that Madhvacharya was sitting with a full stomach and completely satisfied. He had eaten all of that uncooked horse gram, and he had digested it also. So the mother was terrified, because normally if a young child eats that, they're going to be very, very sick. So she was turning the child upside and looking inside, but there was no effect to Madhvacharya. After some time, Madhvacharya, he was in the midst of his childhood antics. Can we shut the door? It's a little loud. Can we just shut the door? Possible? When Madhvacharya was in the midst of his childhood antics, at some point he started to feel like this. Remembering the words of Lord Narayan, he felt, people in general today actually really need guidance. And he was thinking, if I were to stay on in this household life and get married, then people today would not respect that position. I need to take the renounced order of life to show them that renunciation of worldly pleasures allows one to intensify one's devotional service to Narayan. Now I know that this can be done whether one is married or not. But if I'm not married, then I can better convey this message to others. Thinking this, he just left his home and he walked to one very exalted personality. We mentioned his name previously. Is my voice heard at the back or is it soft? So he went to one exalted personality called Achyuta Preksha. Now, Achyuta Preksha, Madhva Vijaya describes his glories. Achyuta Preksha was actually also present in Krishna's, when Krishna appeared in Dwaraka, in Dwapar Yuga. At that time, when the Pandavas and Draupadi were in the forest area, Achyuta Preksha was a simple Brahmin. And he was so fortunate when one day the Pandavas and Draupadi were banished in the forest, he happened to obtain a small quantity of the remnants of Draupadi. And he happened to take it as the remnants of an exalted Vaishnavi. As a result of this, in his next birth, he became the sannyasi called Achyuta Preksha. And he was going to be gifted with a disciple, Madhvacarya. Actually, Achyuta Preksha, because he was initiated in a seemingly Mayavad line. Because remember, all the Vaishnava sannyasis had entered the Mayavad lines to protect their own devotional service. When his own spiritual master was on the verge of leaving this world, at that time, his spiritual master had told him, in all of our superiors, all of our previous spiritual masters, and myself, have never once realized that we are Brahman or that we are equal to the Supreme Lord. There is no truth to this statement. Hear my words and develop very deep and intense devotional service for Madhava. Develop Madhava as in the Supreme Lord, Krishna, and worship him with all your heart. This is the truth that I want to share with you. Saying this, Achyuta Preksha's guru left this world. Achyuta Preksha was a very simple, and a very dedicated disciple. He took the words of his spiritual master very deeply to heart, and he was always contemplating, what does this mean? How do I actually achieve this? In Udupi, there's a deity of the Lord called Anantashena or Ananteshwar. Has anybody seen this form of the Lord? So, or sometimes in Madhva Vijaya, this deity of the Lord is called Anantashana. So he would worship Anantashana on a daily basis, seeking desperately for anything that would reveal the glories of the Lord, that would teach him the path of devotional service. Hence his name was Achyuta Preksha. Preksha means anticipation, to desire, to want to see. And Achyuta is of course the Supreme Lord. So Achyuta Preksha literally means one who is aspiring for or desiring the Lord. Achyuta Preksha, when he was worshipping Anantashana every day, one day, Anantashana, he entered the body of a nearby devotee. And he spoke to Achyuta Preksha in a very deep voice. He said, the answer to all of your faithful prayers is coming very, very soon. Soon my exalted devotee will come and he will teach you the true meaning of the scriptures and the way in which devotional service can be performed. Very soon after, Madhvacharya left his home, contemplating that only sannyas would allow him to reach out to people in general. And he went to meet Achyuta Preksha. When he offered obeisances to Achyuta Preksha recognized the symptoms of an exalted personality in Vasudeva. He noticed 32 exalted symptoms of a Mahatma in the bodies of Vasudeva. And very happily, he began to accept him as his disciple. Vasudeva asked for sannyas, and Achyuta Preksha gladly agreed. Madhvacharya was only a young boy at this time, hardly 8 years old. His father came to know of Vasudeva's intentions, and he came running behind Vasudeva. He said, my son, you're my only son. 2 other sons before you were born and they've left by the Lord's grace. If you also go, who will take care of us, your old mother and father? Who will be there for us when we grow old? Vasudeva remained steadfast. He said, my dear father, it is not true that the main purpose of the scriptures is to take care of one's parents. because his father had told him, do not the scriptures say that one's parents should be taken care of? And Madhva and Vasudev said, it is true that one's parents are an object of devotion and service. Nonetheless, when one develops an attitude of devotional service to the Lord, one becomes free of other obligations, and one's only obligation becomes to serve the Supreme Lord. By fulfilling this main obligation, every other obligation is satisfied. Of course, this is the truth. So Madhyageha Bhatta did not know what to say. He just fell flat at his, this is an Indian parent style of trying to persuade their children. He fell flat at his son's feet and said, please, I beg you. No, normally when a superior falls at your feet, it's an embarrassing situation. And you immediately feel like saying, okay, I'm sorry, please don't do this. I will follow your instructions. So in a similar mood, Madhyageha Bhatta fell at his son's feet and said, my dear son, please, I'm begging you, I'm offering obeisances. Please don't take sannyas. Madhvacharya replied, in the Shastras it is said that when the only situation under which parents offer obeisances to their son is when the son takes the renounced order of life. So by your offering obeisances, you've implicitly given me permission. So thank you very much. Madhyageha Bhatta was stumped. He didn't know what to say. But he said, my son, if you do this, I will fast until death. And then Vasudev said, but my dear father, you don't want to lose me. If you fast until death, you're going to lose me anyway. What is the point of your doing what you're doing? Then Madhyageha Bhatta said, at least please wait until we get another son. So then when you leave, we'll have someone to take care of us. In his mind, he had a plan. He was thinking, I'll give permission, but I'll tell my wife not to give permission. That way, he will not be able to go. Because normally there's a little bit more of an attachment between the mother and the son. So Vasudeva agreed. He said, yes, father, this is your desire? Okay. And he went back with Madhyageha Bhatta home. Very soon, Vedavati fell pregnant again. And they delivered another healthy, wonderful son. And Madhvacharya was about to leave yet again. Vedavati kept the words of her husband in mind. And she said, my son, please don't go. I don't wish to give you permission. Vasudev said, mother, you have two choices. You give me permission to take sannyas, you will still see me. But if you don't give me permission, I will leave home. I may not take sannyas, but you will never see me again. And his mother said, okay, if at least I can see you sometimes, you go, you take sannyas. So with permission of both his parents, reluctant permission, Vasudev went and he took shelter of Achyuta Preksha. Achyuta Preksha gave him the principal garment of a sannyasi is the kaupin. So he presented him with the saffron kaupin of a sannyasi. And as a young boy, still not even 8 or 10 years old, Madhvacharya dressed in the saffron robes of a sannyasi. Everybody surrounding him was astonished with his extraordinary effulgence, and they began to bless him. Later on, when Achyuta Preksha was beginning to teach Madhvacharya the scriptures, he wanted, let my disciple, he's young, let him become strong in the Shastras, let him become strong in his renunciation. So Madhvacharya was not actually, his name after sannyas became Purna Pragya, one who is full in all wisdom and knowledge. So Purna Pragya, he was hearing this and he did not seem interested. And he told his spiritual master, the verse that you've recited, it's the first verse of some scripture, which was typically taught in the Mayavad Sampradaya. He said the very first verse is riddled with faults. And he began to explain 32 faults of that first verse. His spiritual master was astonished. He said, well, what do you want to study? You're a sannyasi. You have to study something. And he said, let us discard all of these useless scriptures and let us focus on studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam is the faultless scripture. And by studying this one scripture, all the purpose of every scripture can be attained. So Achyuta Preksha accepted his disciples' words and he began to speak from the Bhagavatam. But even as he was speaking from the Bhagavatam, Madhvacharya noticed that there were some discrepancies. Because remember, Achyuta Preksha had not been fully trained in the Vaishnava principles. And so Madhvacharya just politely stopped him and began to correct his explanations. Achyuta Preksha said, "My son, if you really know the Srimad Bhagavatam, can you recite the prose section of the 5th canto of Bhagavatam?" Now, for those who have read the Bhagavatam or seen the Bhagavatam, they will know that there are several chapters in the initial section of the 5th canto which are in a prose version. This means that it cannot be sung easily in a meter. It is like long sentences that occupy that section of Bhagavatam. It's actually quite a difficult section of Bhagavatam to recite, a very difficult section of Bhagavatam to sometimes explain. Achyuta Preksha asked him, "Can you please explain this section?" Without hesitation, Madhvacharya began to say, "5th canto, chapter this, verse number this," he recited the verse. Then 2nd verse, he recited it. He kept going, verse after verse after verse. He recited the entire section, and he explained it also. His spiritual master was astounded. He said, "How do you know all this?" And as when Madhvacharya was young, he said, "This is knowledge I've assimilated in previous lifetimes." Achyuta Preksha was convinced that his disciple was ready to become the head of that ashram, and he installed Purna Pragya as the head of that sampradaya. This officially meant that Purna Pragya could now go and debate with others and establish the Vaishnava philosophy, because he was sheltered under a recognized ashrama, and his ability or the facility offered as the head of that ashrama was to go and to teach and debate other philosophies as and when required. When Purna Pragya was thus debating, his father would sometimes come to see him, and this is actually very touching. His father would sit in the audience, and he would be so proud of his son, just reciting and talking so wonderfully about the scriptures. He would sit and just look from the audience at his son, his eyes lining with tears. His tears were so much that he could hardly see his son. But he would just come and relish the presence of his son, just speaking about the glories of the Lord from the audience. And this is how he would interact with him. Because now he was a man of the world, Madhvacharya. He didn't belong to a particular family anymore. The world was his family. He didn't belong to a particular home. The entire world was his home. And as part of the entire world, his father would come and associate with Purna Pragya or Madhvacharya. Very soon, Purna Pragya thought, "I need to now actually go visit my actual Shiksha Guru, and that is Vedavyas." He wanted to go to Badrik Ashrama to learn from Srila Vyasadeva and to present the scriptures according to the real intention that Vyasadeva had. Achyuta Preksha could not tolerate separation from Madhvacharya. And so Madhvacharya, he wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita at that time. And he presented it as a gift to his spiritual master. He said, "Even if I'm not personally here, these are my instructions. If you read them, you will always experience my presence." Giving this as a gift to his guru, he walked with a small group because he was the head of a mutt and he could take disciples. He walked with a small group of his disciples from the mutt, which was in South India, all the way up to Badrik Ashrama, which was in North India. The time at Badrik Ashrama is actually of central importance in Madhava's pastimes, because this is where we see the empowerment that he received and the depth of understanding that he had over the scriptures. The journey from South India to North India was replete with many, many, many instances. And Madhva Vijaya notes how he encountered various Buddhists, various philosophers from the Shankara line, many other philosophers who were present in India. And the ease with which he would debate and defeat these philosophies to establish devotional service to the Lord. This description from Madhva Vijaya is really extensive and wonderful to read. When Madhvacharya went to Badrik Ashrama, he decided, until and unless I receive mercy from Vyasadeva and from Nara Narayana Rishi, who are the presiding deities of Badrik Ashrama, I will fast. So for 40 days, he fasted, he didn't sleep. And they say that you never go empty-handed when you go before the Lord. So as his gift to the Lord, he began to recite his commentary from the Bhagavad Gita. And as he was reciting the commentary, his disciples, they were in another room, they would hear the deity in lower Badri stamp his feet. Like, when you really like a performance, you stamp your feet. It's like, well done, well done, well done. And it's actually better done with your feet. Like, that's good. That's really good. That's exactly it. And so the Lord was actually stamping his feet to acknowledge and to appreciate Madhva's recitation of the Bhagavad Gita. So for 40 days in this way, Madhvacharya was just there in lower Badri, waiting for a sign. He received a sign that Vedavyas wanted to see him. And Vedavyas, now Badrik Ashrama, it has the lower Badri where you have the deity. And of course, it's a very, very beautiful and a very pious place. But there is a secret Badri, an Uttar Badri. And that is accessible only to the most exalted of personalities. Naranarayana Rishi personally stay there. And alongside Naranarayana Rishi, Vedavyas himself resides there. So, when the appropriate sign was received from Vedavyas, Madhva, he began to move. He told all his disciples, look, I don't know if I'm going to come back or not. His disciples were completely devastated. Particularly, there was one disciple called Satyatirtha who was very, very attached to Madhvacharya. And he was not able to tolerate separation from Madhvacharya. But he told his disciples, see, I don't know when I'm coming back. The reason is that Madhvacharya was very strongly attached to Vyasadeva. And he was thinking, if Vyasadeva allows me, I will just stay there. I just want to stay in his association and just be with him. So when Madhvacharya was leaving, Satyatirtha began to discreetly follow Madhvacharya. Now, Madhvacharya as Mukhya Pran, he was jumping from peak to peak among the mountains. And Satyatirtha could not call out to his spiritual master because he was following in secret. So he was running and tripping over rocks, and he was trying to somehow, the other, seeing his spiritual master in a very great distance, he was somehow trying to just keep up with his guru. But at some point, he became caught in a very precarious situation. And you can imagine there are no ropes, no steps have ever been cut there. No human being ordinarily ever walks in those directions. And he was basically in a place where if he took a step forward or backwards, he would fall down and die. And he began to call out very loudly, "Oh Gurudev, please save me." And Madhvacharya turned around. He saw his disciple about to fall. And he was like, and his disciple just flew back, like the many dozens and dozens of kilometers back to the ashram. He just flew and he landed safely among the disciples, who were surprised. They didn't realize that Satyatirtha had left. He was like, "Where did you come from?" And that's the only way we know what Madhvacharya did when he was flying from peak to peak. Because Satyatirtha was the only one who observed this. So Madhvacharya, he flew from peak to peak to peak, and he finally made his way to Uttar Badri. This Uttar Badri, the description in Madhva Vijaya is exactly like Vaikuntha. It was completely resplendent with exalted personalities who were completely free from all envy and absorbed in devotional service to the Lord. It's known as a Badri tree. I don't know what that is, but a vast Badri tree that was spread in all directions. Surrounding this tree were exalted sages, and all of whom were reciting the glories of Lord Narayan. In the midst of all of them, resplendent and more effulgent than all of these sages was Vedavyas himself. Vedavyas, seeing Madhva, he got up. And Madhva, there's an entire chapter in Madhva Vijaya where Madhvacharya composes verse after verse after verse to glorify Vyasadeva. Madhva Vijaya says that this meeting of Madhvacharya and Vyasadeva was just like the meeting of Hanuman and Sri Ramachandra after a long period of separation, or the meeting of Bhima and Krishna after a long period of separation. The verses that Madhvacharya recites at that time are explained in two ways. One almost as a glorification of Sri Ramachandra, and one as a glorification of Sri Krishna. This was the mood with which Madhvacharya was approaching Srila Vedavyas. When they embraced, Madhvacharya, among his many prayers, he said, "Let me not be envious of this twig of tulsi that's sitting so close to you on your ear, because I want that closeness to you also." Srila Vedavyas, he took him and he had him meet Naranarayana Rishi. With meeting Naranarayana Rishi, he received the instruction to go and preach according to the Vedanta Sutra commentary. Vedavyas then took him and he began to instruct him in all of the scriptures. Through the guidance of Vedavyas, he received instructions in the Mahabharata, in the 18 principal Puranas, and the Srimad Bhagavatam. All of the meaning of all of these scriptures was conveyed to Madhvacharya. And it is considered that this chapter of Madhva Vijaya is considered to be the central chapter in the whole work, because it shows the extent and depth with which Madhva understood the scriptures, and the depth that was conveyed through his own commentaries later on. It is stated that his commentaries are so wonderful that they can be accessed even by a simple person who's trying to understand. And yet, it can be accessed by even deeply learned personalities who want to deeply understand the scriptures in detail. In fact, the same thing can be said of Srila Prabhupada's books. For a simple person approaching Srila Prabhupada's books for the first time, Srila Prabhupada's books convey a wealth of meaning. But if somebody really wants to go deep and really wants to apply their intelligence to understanding these works, one can also similarly go very, very deep into Srila Prabhupada's books. Madhvacharya then came back down to Badrik Ashram, the lower Badrik Ashram, and he began to set up his center of preaching. We only have a few minutes left. There are many important instances in Madhvacharya's pastimes that we have not yet covered. I'll briefly speak about the one that should not be missed. This is the establishment of the principal temple at Udupi. Many of you know when Sripad Madhvacharya was walking by the shore of a beach, there was a ship that was coming from Dwaraka. Now this ship was a mercantile ship. It contained several items of cargo. And to balance the ship, people would often take lumps of clay in an area where Gopi Chandan could be formed. Previously in Krishna's pastimes, the gopis had come to this very area, and the dust of their feet and their bodies had entered into this lake and formed the Gopi Chandan. This Gopi Chandan is valued as very sacred by all the Vaishnavas and is used to apply the markings of tilak around their body. But it's clay, and so this clay was being used as huge lumps to counterbalance the heavy weights on cargo ships. So one day, this cargo ship was just coming to the shore of the beach, and Madhvacharya was just walking along the shore. He noticed the ship in danger, and he just began to guide the ship safely to the shore. He did this by taking his sannyas cloth and waving it. It's saffron, so it could be seen more easily, rather than like a blue dress or something in that environment. The shipman, he asked Madhvacharya, please take anything from my cargo that you like. You've saved the entire ship and the lives of everybody there. Madhvacharya said, do you have any Gopi Chandan? He asked him, where are you coming from? I'm coming from Dwaraka. Do you have any Gopi Chandan? I've got 2 huge blocks. Can I take it? And he said, yes, please take it. And these 2 lumps of clay were given to Madhvacharya. These 2 lumps of clay, when they broke open, they were revealed to be the deities of Balaram and of Krishna. Now these deities are extremely special because it is said that when Rukmini was herself serving Krishna as a wife, she came to know about Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes, and particularly his pastimes as Bal Gopal, and she was very attracted. She told the Lord, please, is there any way by which I can worship your form as Bal Gopal? So Krishna ordered Vishwakarma, the architect of the demigods, to come and carve a deity in the likeness of his form as Bal Gopal, so that this deity could be worshipped by Rukmini. So this form of the Lord, he has like a rope in one hand and some butter in the other hand. And this form of the Lord was very dear to Rukmini. Through time, of course, it was lost, because when Krishna and his associates wound up their pastimes, Arjuna took this deity and placed it in that area, Dwaraka area, but it was lost over time. And it had kind of formed within this clay. And when Madhvacharya appeared, the Lord wanted to be worshipped, and so he manifested his form there again. This is the form of the Lord who is the center of worship of all of Madhva's followers in Udupi. There's just one last thing I just want to say before we have to end. Madhvacharya's favorite scripture was the Aitareya Samhita, Aitareya Upanishad. It was spoken by a great sage Aitareya. And this Upanishad glorifies the Supreme Lord. And one of the specific tenets that it explains is that every word indicates ultimately the Supreme Lord. No matter what you say, whatever name you may take John, Paul, you may take a name like Abhishek or anything. You take any word, any name, and ultimately it can be traced into the glories of the Lord. It establishes the importance of Vayu as a servant of the Lord, and it establishes how one can be purified by worshipping the Lord and Vayu. The Aitareya Samhita was what Madhvacharya was reciting when he left this world. Madhvacharya's importance to our line is that he very strongly established devotional service to the deity of the Lord, and you will always see him stand like this. This is a sign that the Jiva, the living entity, and the Supreme Lord are always two and are always separate from each other. This emphasis of the difference between the living entity and the Lord is essential for anybody who wants to perform devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita, before Krishna even begins to instruct us on the spirit soul, his verse is Natva eva ham jatu nasham natvam neme janadipa. O Arjuna, never was there a time when we were not separate. We have always been separate. You, I, all these kings, we are separate now. We are always separate in the future. This verse is the first instruction before any other instruction is given. And it is given to establish that devotional service to the Lord is the only way by which every other knowledge can be realized. This was Madhvacharya's contribution. We have to end here. I'm very sorry for the delay. Hare Krishna.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.